holidays and then returning back to work. So I wanted to see how people were doing, as well as talk about what I said earlier, gatekeeping in macro work. Let's see. First, I want to talk about the fact that the podcast episode will be loaded tonight. Normally, I have it loaded on Sunday nights, but I haven't done that yet. But the podcast episode is really good. It's a conversation that I had with a former colleague of mine who works in Washington, D.C. currently, and she does work on a national level regarding her population, which is opportunity youth. And I called in a favor and I asked her to do the podcast episode with me because I consider her to be a young professional. She says in the episode that she's not. But the reason I wanted to spotlight her work is because she keeps her population at the center of every conversation. She was the one that educated me on the needs, the large-scale needs of opportunity youth. And if you're not familiar with that population, basically opportunity youth are youth who are disconnected from education and career-related like programs and services. So these may be youth who stopped going to school years ago, but they're not like actively involved in any type of social service or community level type program. And so it's a huge subset of the youth, the young adult population that are classified as opportunity youth. And there's a lot of work on a national level around how to effectively engage those youth back into community like happenings regarding career and education. And so Antonia is her name, and that podcast episode will be live hopefully tonight, if not in the morning. But I encourage you to check it out on your commute to work, because she talks a lot about what it took for her to make the pivot from being because she's not a social worker, right? Because I also work with non-social workers, but I didn't work with Antonia. She got her job through working through another career coach. But she talks about the fact of like how she went from working on the front lines, working directly with youth, to working with the National Think Tank organization, and the fact that she was fearful a lot of the times, but and she gave strategies of how she worked through those fears of advancing in her career. Another reason I asked Antonia to come on to the podcast episode is because Antonia has her bachelor's degree, and she had her bachelor's degree when she secured that role. So I wanted to bring her on as an example of what I always say, like, you don't need extra credentials and certifications. You technically don't even need a master's degree a lot of the times, depending on the types of roles that you're going after, to get macro jobs. And when it comes to macro jobs, it is heavily led by professionals from other majors and backgrounds. So Antonia's I'm sure she tells us in the episode, I don't remember what her bachelor's degree is in, and maybe something related to education, but it's nothing related, like closely related to social sciences. And so I want to say, like, there are people doing the work that you all do every day, but they're doing it on the national level. When I say every day, there are tons of social workers out there that work with opportunity youth, right? And so in those roles, a lot of you see issues, gaps, the silos, the inadequacies in services. And I always say, who better than you to advocate for those programs and services on a national level? And so going back to what I originally said when I first got on the live around Antonia and I always talking about like national leaders not legitimizing what we would call in social work meso level organizations, community level organizations, grassroots organizations that are already doing this work and who have proven track records, right? So I can't even count on one hand how many meetings I sat in last year where it was like these organizations do this work and they do it really well, and you should partner with them, and just like, well, no, we're going to try to do it on our own, like being very dismissive. And so Antonia reminds me of those endless conversations that we have, because she talks about, because I asked her about her future career plans, and she talks about the fact that she wants to eventually go into like consulting around program evaluation. And I began to talk about how we need people in the program evaluation space to legitimize programs and services, especially those grassroots organizations, because in the cities that we live in, there are some phenomenal organizations out there that have been doing work for years who are not deemed as valid because they aren't attached to like large funders, or just have like the financial backing or the political backing that they need. And so again, this is another reason why we need macro social workers in all spaces, including program evaluation, to legitimize and to because when it comes to macro efforts, especially when you're talking to funders and political leaders, they just want to know about the data, right? A lot of organizations are moving to like the stories, the qualitative data pieces. Storytelling is really big on the macro level, but for the most part, they want to see the numbers. They want to know the ROI. And what I mean by that is, if we invest XYZ dollars back, how will we benefit from this in our community, in our city, in our parish, right? And so we need program evaluators there that can say like, hey, this organization has been in the community, has been doing this outstanding work for years. We need to bring them in on this conversation, especially if you are a social worker that's interested in like getting rid of a lot of those, what do you call it? The silos, where there's 50 organizations, or duplication of services also. There's 50 different organizations in the city and they all do the same thing and no one talks to each other, right? That's also a major national issue that macro organizations are working to address in this call, and to use more of a collective impact approach. How can we all come together to pool our resources to work towards this one common goal, instead of one organization wanting to lead the work and then this organization wanting to lead the work? And so a lot of the issues that come around doing collective impact work is that city leaders, national leaders don't know who the key players are, right? They only know about their organization's work. They don't know about organization 20 miles away that does blah, 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 especially if they're not already in constant communication. So collective impact is a big area of interest right now in a national effort. And again, I would like to see more macro social workers in that space talking about collective impact, but also advocating for those smaller organizations that are already doing work out there. It may not be evidence-based, but you know, when you send your participant there, they're going to get what they need, right? They're going to get what they need. They're going to exit the program, and they are like being self-sufficient for whatever the goal of that program. We need social workers to be at the table to advocate. And so program evaluation is one way that we talk about in the podcast episode that I'm going to release tomorrow, of doing that, where you go out and you evaluate programs and based on the data help legitimize these programs that have been just like the underdogs because they don't have the capacity to go after the large funding pots, or don't have the social capital or network. So I got in a whole thing about macro just then, and I really came on to talk about that, to talk about the podcast, also to see how your Monday was. And I see that some people have come in. So drop in the chat if you're here. Let me know how your Monday was. I really just wanted to do a well-being check, and then I started talking about all things macro because I was I'm looking at the podcast episode that I'm getting ready to load up. So in the interim, I'm going to try to go live again before the week is out. I'm not 100% certain what day, but I want to come back and talk to you all about another topic when it comes to communicating what your skill set and your value add to organizations should be or should look like and should not look like, because I'm learning a lot about how social workers are taught, right? It's not, social workers don't just come out of the sky with these things. They're taught these things by professors, mentors, people that they really admire and value, but it's not comprehensive enough to really get you a job, right? And so I want to talk about some terms that I recently learned about, and I'm still trying to wrap my brain around where it came from and why that is such a thing. But I want to talk about the cons of using that terminology or ways of explaining your work or your abilities as a social worker, especially a social worker that's interested in macro work, because it doesn't translate to macro employers. So I'm really going to talk a lot about quantifying your experiences and your skill set and your education in ways that appeal to employers instead of in these elusive terms and words that social workers love to float around on the social work street. So I'm going to end there. I hope you have a wonderful Monday. Turn your alerts on. I'm going to go back live. If you are new to my platform, you're watching this replay back, click the link in my bio. Get my free e-course. It's a labor of my love, like I always say. It is a comprehensive free e-course where I talk about all things macro social work, what it is, what the pay looks like, examples of organizations where macro social workers work, what the scope of work looks like, all of the things. And I even give you homework, because I wouldn't be the MSW coach if I didn't give you homework. So I hope you have a wonderful evening. I hope your Monday back at work was good. It wasn't too stressful. And remember, tomorrow's a new day with new beginnings. Happy macro career planning. Bye.